What's going on YouTube? This is ParkerLad88 coming at you with another video. Today I want to do a deck profile of my absolute most favorite deck in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! And that is Neo-Spacians. Thanks to the new Hero Strike Structure deck, this deck got a huge boost of support, being able to integrate the masked hero support. So I want to show you guys what I came up with. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this deck profile. This is going to be the Power of Neos. So first, let's go ahead and get started with the monsters. We start with running 3 copies of Elemental Hero Neos. This deck is all about him, so we run 3 copies of him. Next up, we have 3 copies of Elemental Hero Prisma. Really great for setting up your Miracle Contact plays. He is the catalyst behind the entire deck. You reveal 1 fusion monster from your extra deck, and then you send one of the specifically listed fusion material monsters listed on that card from your deck to the graveyard, and he becomes the name of that monster. So he's really great at sending your Neo-Spacians, sending your Neos monsters, all that good stuff. So we run 3 copies of him. This deck does not function without this card. Next up, we've got some masked hero support in the form of Elemental Hero Shadow Mist. He is new Stratos. When he gets sent to the graveyard, add a Elemental Hero from your deck to your hand, and when he special summon, add a Mass Change Quick Play spell from your deck to your hand. So he allows us to integrate the Masked Hero support. Next up, the Neo-Spacian aspect, we run 1 copy of Neo-Spacian Grand Mole. He's really good at getting rid of problematic monsters, and he is by far the best Neo-Spacian. Next up, we have 1 copy of Neo-Spacian Aqua Dolphin. This guy's effect is kind of confusing, but I'll explain it in the best way that I can. So, once per turn, you discard a card from your hand. You take a look at your opponent's hand. If your opponent has a monster in their hand that is weaker than the strongest monster that you control, you destroy that monster, and your opponent takes 500 damage. If that opponent's monster is stronger than the strongest monster that you control, then you take 500 damage, and you don't get to destroy the card. So he's really good at keeping tabs on your opponent's hand if you really need to, and just getting rid of cards like Shadow Mist and Neos and other Neo-Spacians to set up your Miracle Contact plays. You have 1 copy of Neo-Spacian Flare Scared, gain 400 attack points for every spell and trap your opponent controls. Then we have 1 copy of Neo-Spacian Air Hummingbird, gain 500 extra life points for every card in your opponent's hand. Really good for helping you accumulate extra life points, even though that's usually not what people use them for, unless you're and you're in a really desperate situation. Next up, we run 1 copy of Card Ejector, hashtag not really. This is actually a placeholder for Neo-Space Pathfinder, so I could go ahead and get you guys out this deck profile. Neo-Space Pathfinder is an 1800 attack point monster with 800 defense. It is level 4, it is a light warrior, and you can send it to the graveyard to search for a copy of Neo-Space from your deck or from your graveyard. So it's great at recycling your Neo-Spaces from the graveyard, so you have the ultimate amount, or if you need to get to a Neo-Space right away, you send it to the graveyard. And the fact that it beats for 18 if you really need to is also nice. And it's a warrior. Next up, we run 1 copy of Elemental Hero Necroshade. When Necroshade is in the graveyard, you can normal summon an Elemental Hero monster without tributing, but you can only do that once while this card's in the graveyard. It's really great to just drop a 2500 attack point Neos, and people are like, oh my gosh, how did you do that? You didn't tribute, just like in the show. So funny. Next up, we run 1 copy of Elemental Hero Bubble Man. Special summon this guy, helps go for Exceed plays, and the nifty little draw to effect if you don't control any other cards. Next up, we have 1 copy of Honest, because we have a bunch of light cards. So, 1 copy of Honest, even though he's a 2. Only needs 1. So that does it for all of the monsters. Next up, we're going to move into spells. We run 3 copies of E-Call to search out whatever heroes we need, but mostly we're going to be searching out that copy of Charisma. Next up, we run 3 copies of Oversoul. Allows you to special summon back 1 normal Elemental Hero monster, i.e. Elemental Hero Neos. So you summon your Prisma, toss out your Neos, bring it back with this. Allows you to pseudo-flood the field. Next up, we run 3 copies of the main spell card in this deck, Miracle Contact. You send back fusion materials from your hand, graveyard, or field in order to go for a Neos fusion monster, ignoring its summon condition. So it's the main way to get them out. So we run 3 copies of this, setting it up with Prisma, of course. And if you play your cards right, it's actually a way you can get multiple Neo-Spacian monsters on the field. And I actually don't think this card's once per turn either, so just kind of putting that one out there. Next up, we run 3 copies of Master Change, allowing us to integrate the Master Hero fusions into our deck. Because we have a bunch of light and dark targets, we can go for Koga, we can go for Dark Law, and I might think about integrating some of the other Master Heroes, but for now, I'm just going to use these preliminary decks. With more testing, I'll figure out what I want to do. Next up, we have 2 copies of Neo-Space in Ultimate Rare form, of course, so I had to run them. This gives an extra 5% attack to all of your Elemental Hero Neos monsters and your fusions, and it prevents your fusions from going back to the extra deck, which was the one drawback to why a lot of people don't really play this deck, and so why it just kind of sucks using them, because they actually do have all pretty good effects. It's just they all go back to the extra deck at the end phase, so this puts a damper on that. 1 copy of Instant Neo-Space, because you don't always have Neo-Space, and as the name implies, it is an Instant Neo-Space. Equip it, and your fusions don't go back. And if they do go back, you get a free Neos from your hand deck graveyard. Pretty cool. 1 Convert Contact. If you don't control any monsters, send a Neo-Spacian from your hand. That's just an extra right there. And 1 from your deck to the graveyard, you get to draw 2 cards. So you get to draw 2 cards, and you get to set up your Miracle Contact plays. Really nice. 1 copy of Foolish Burial, because we have a bunch of different targets. 1 copy of Reinforcing the Army, just so we can search for hero stuff, but we can also search for things like Aqua Dolphin and Neo-Space Pathfinder, if we really feel like we need to get that field spell or that extra Neo-Spacian together. And that does for the spells. Next up, we have our traps, pretty simple. 2 copies of Breakthrough Skill, 2 Calls of the Haunted for pretty much everything in our deck, and then Solemn Warning. And moving, and that does it for the entire main deck. Moving into the extra deck, we have 1 copy of Elemental Hero Magma Neos, probably one of my favorites, and I have him in secret rare form, which is doubly awesome. So what this guy does is he gains 400 attack points for every card on the field, which is pretty insane, which means he can get up to some pretty stupidly high attack power. And then if he leaves the field by his own effect, you send all cards on the field back to their respective player's hand. So he kind of is like Triver that way. He's probably Triver or Triver. Being able to send everything back is always nice, and just that supreme beating power is pretty insane. Next up, we run 1 copy of Elemental Hero Storm Neos. As his name implies, he is a heavy storm once per turn. So you have to kind of be careful about how you use him to make sure he stays on the field. Also, just like Elemental Hero Magma Neos, he has a board wiping effect too. So when he gets sent back to the extra deck by his own effect, he sends everything back to the respective players' decks. So he's actually a better board wiper than Triver that way, and even better than Magma Neos. So he's pretty darn cool. Next up, we run 1 copy of Elemental Hero Air Neos, part of the Air Neos OTK. So he's kind of a comeback card. He gains attack points equal to the difference between you and your opponent's life points if your life points are lower than your opponent's. So if you have like 100 life points left, he gains 7,900 attack points, which is pretty dumb on top of his already 25. Next up, we have Elemental Hero Flare Neos. Just like Magma Neos, he gains attack, but he gains it for every spell and trap on the field. So he's a mini Magma Neos, but he's still really, really good. Next up, we have Elemental Hero Grand Neos. Grand Neos, once per turn, can send 1 monster on the field back to the hand. Really good at spot removal, and that 2,500 attack points is always nice. Then we run 1 copy of Elemental Hero Dark Break. Because we run 1 Necroshade, we need a monster for Prisma, a target for Prisma, so I can send the Necroshade, so we run 1 copy of him, and that's the only reason why we run. Next up, for the Master Hero part, we run 2 copies of Koga. Koga, he's a super beater, and the fact that we have all these heroes means that we can send banish them if we need to in order to decrease our opponent's monster's attack. Then we run 2 copies of Dark Law, the main part of the Master Hero engine. Everybody knows what he does, so I won't belabor that. So that does it for all of our fusions. And then, next up we have the Exceeds. We have Cowboy, Excalibur, we have a bunch of warriors. 1 Castel, the Sky Blaster Musketeer, 1 Evil Former Cyclone Knight, and 1 Abyss Relic. Because we're running Bubble Man, we can stop our opponents from activating the graveyard effects, and we get that extra 500 nice. So guys, that was the Power of Neos deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll be back at you later with future videos. This is Parker Lad, out. Almost forgot about my hero token. This is an Elemental Hero deck after all. Jaden would be so proud.